Rachel Zegler just keeps making things worse with the Walt Disney Company.
Snow White's budget was around $240 to $270 million. It has made $43 million domestically so far and around $84 million globally per Box Office Pro.
The original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so.
Snow White is the first American feature-length animated movie, 1937. It's one of the most beloved movies of all time.
Disney doesn't know what a Disney princess is anymore,
Yes.
which is crazy.
It's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
It's not going to be saved by the prince.
Even if everything worked perfectly, it would have been almost impossible for this movie to succeed.
Imagine a remake of Disney's first full-length animated film, one that revolutionized cinema in 1937.
The more that she tries to defend this movie, the more that she tries to spew her agenda onto the general public, it's only making matters worse. Not just for Bob Iger, but for whatever is left of the image of Disney as a whole.
Now re-emerging in 2025 with a bold plan to redefine a centuries-old fairy tale for a radically different audience.
Jonah Platt, whose father helped produce the latest Snow White film, had some very harsh words for star Rachel Zegler.
For context, Variety wrote a report recently titled Inside Disney's Snow White Fiasco, Death Threats, Beefed Up Security, and a Social Media Guru for Rachel Zegler.
That's what Snow White 2025 was supposed to be, a loving homage meets progressive update, anchored by the luminous talent of Rachel Zegler.
EV Magazine wrote on X, when you compare how Rachel Zegler spoke about Snow White to how other actresses who played live-action Disney princesses spoke about their character, really underlines just how poorly she carried herself.
Yet, instead of a neat passing of the baton from the classic to the contemporary, we've witnessed what some are calling the biggest meltdown in Disney's live-action history.
I am in the thick of rehearsals for Romeo plus Juliet, so I'm gonna get out of here. Bye for now. The Variety story notes how a couple of minutes after posting this, she replied to her own tweet and wrote, "And always remember, free Palestine."
Fans are feuding online, behind-the-scenes drama is leaking into the public sphere, and rumor has it that Rachel's outspokenness landed her in a tense emergency meeting with Disney's legal team.
Variety breaks down how after this tweet went viral, the studio was shocked that she would mix a promo tweet with a political statement. As a result, Mark Platt flew to New York to speak with her in person.
How did a simple reimagining of an 86-year-old princess story turn into a sprawling fiasco that questions everything from brand loyalty to the power of fan nostalgia?
On the original production, I was scared of it. Oh, it was so weird. It was a stalker. Like, I feel like if you are taking on the most iconic Disney role ever, genuinely, like this was the most prolific Disney film, I feel like you should kind of have some sort of reverence for the original production.
Buckle up, because the ride is only getting bumpier.
There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her.
Yeah, we had more dwarfs than we did viewers in most of these theaters. And as you know, there were no dwarfs other than some CGI weird generated version of them.
Because you're comparing it to one of the most beloved films of all time and a truly groundbreaking movie.
Rachel Zegler wasn't always a magnet for controversy. She burst onto the Hollywood scene with the kind of meteoric rise young performers dream of. Discovered by Steven Spielberg, praised for her vocal power and acting chops, as a rising star with endless potential. When word spread that she'd been cast in a new Snow White, most fans thought, of course! She had the angelic singing voice, the bright screen presence, and that intangible spark that made her seem tailor-made for a Disney princess role.
Narcissism is not something to be coddled or encouraged. Zegler isn't the only one who has made political statements, though. Her co-star Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, expressed her staunch support for Israel.
At first, the press mainly focused on how Rachel's energy might breathe new life into the legendary story. It seemed straightforward. Disney had already banked huge profits from remakes of other Golden Age hits: Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, The Lion King. Why would Snow White 2025 be any different? But signs of trouble emerged once Rachel began speaking openly about how she intended to update or modernize aspects of the original.
The film received backlash for various reasons in the lead up to its release. Zegler had called the original Snow White movie dated and weird and said Prince Charming was a stalker.
While some welcomed a stronger, more independent princess, others balked. Could a story so deeply woven into Disney's identity handle a radical makeover, or was meddling with it practically heresy? In a few short interviews, Rachel went from beloved newcomer to polarizing figure. Some heralded her candor, others accused her of trashing a classic. But that was only the first ripple in a looming tidal wave.
EV Magazine wrote on X, when you compare how Rachel Zegler spoke about Snow White to how other actresses who played live-action Disney princesses spoke about their character, really underlines just how poorly she carried herself.
Over the past decade, Disney's live-action blueprint seemed foolproof. Revive an old favorite, wrap it in glossy modern visuals, and rely on nostalgia to carry it over the finish line. Fans flocked to see big names reinterpret beloved characters. Even if critics rolled their eyes, the box office soared. Naturally, expectations for Snow White 2025 were sky high. After all, Snow White is the princess who started it all, Walt Disney's original gamble that turned out to be a phenomenon. If anything was guaranteed to tap into generational fandom, it was this. Except the meltdown took hold far earlier than Disney anticipated.
I'll quickly mention this. The son of Snow White producer Mark Platt, Jonah Platt is the son's name. He is speaking out publicly against Rachel Zegler and blaming her for the film's catastrophic failure at the box office.
Instead of uniting fans around a reimagined but respectful take, the film triggered fierce debates. Rachel's remarks about discarding weird or dated elements from 1937 set off a cultural clash. Loyalists bristled at the idea that the mother of all princess movies was being portrayed as backward or inferior. Meanwhile, progressive fans argued that these older narratives do carry problematic elements, lack of agency, old-school damsel tropes, and that a new version should indeed break from those traditions.
I mean, he's totally right. Now, of course, as we covered, the movie is terrible anyway in its own right. It was probably going to underperform regardless. People are tired of the soulless cash grab remake thing.
Disney executives found themselves caught in a war of words they hadn't predicted. Nostalgia was no longer their guaranteed ally. It had become an explosive weapon wielded by fans unwilling to see a cherished classic overshadowed by modern spin. And the controversies just kept piling on.
The movie has all kinds of problems that could be pinned partly on the producer. Like, the producer did not do a good job. Nobody who produced this movie did a good job.
Rachel Zegler's biggest strength, according to her supporters, is her authenticity. She says what she feels, she doesn't mince words, and she has no patience for sugarcoating. That might sound refreshing, but in the world of Disney, where brand image is king and family friendliness is paramount, it can be a double-edged sword. Not only did Rachel critique the original story, she started tweeting and posting about broader political matters, mixing calls for social change with promotional messages for Snow White 2025. Some fans applauded her for using her platform, but others accused her of overshadowing what should be a whimsical escape with polarizing real-world issues.
Apart from all of the political controversy started by the actress, so the movie had all kinds of problems creatively and conceptually.
The meltdown ramped up each time she gave an interview. Clips circulated where she joked that the prince was basically a stalker, or that the cartoon was weird. Traditionalists viewed this as disrespectful, borderline mocking. They pointed out that Walt Disney personally oversaw the original, pouring his heart and soul into making it a groundbreaking film. For them, hearing the new Snow White star call that milestone dated was more than mere critique. It felt like an attack on the entire foundation of Disney's magic.
There's no doubt that she drove the final nail into this movie's coffin. She probably drove the final 2 or 3 nails into the coffin.
Meanwhile, Rachel's defenders said she was simply highlighting how times have changed and how stories need to reflect contemporary values of equality and self-agency. It didn't help that each of Rachel's statements got compressed into memeable sound bites, leaving little room for nuance. But then, the meltdown found a new level of chaos.
And a lot of what you see with Zegler is really just this pretty common Gen Z mentality and approach to work.
While Rachel was out front taking all the heat, rumors hinted that the real meltdown was happening behind the camera. Multiple sources described the production as chaotic, with script rewrites pushing the budget to staggering levels. Directors, producers, and Disney higher-ups apparently couldn't decide how far to deviate from the original. Should the dwarfs remain comedic sidekicks or be replaced entirely with magical creatures? Did the prince deserve a role at all, or would that undermine the new Snow White approach?
She believes that she should be able to express herself and speak her truth, or whatever nonsense, regardless of the consequences to everybody else.
Then there were marketing headaches. Usually, Disney orchestrates a massive PR parade for a project this big, flashy talk show appearances, interactive social media campaigns, glitzy premieres. With Snow White 2025, it felt subdued. Some suggested Disney was holding back to avoid drawing more attention to the controversy. Others said the meltdown forced them to reevaluate every talking point. If they hammered home the progressive angle, they risked angering purists. If they focused on nostalgia, they contradicted Rachel's open disdain for certain old-school tropes. So, marketing was stuck in limbo, promoting a film that half the fanbase already disliked based on rumors alone. But the Meltdown's biggest bombshell was yet to come.
In reality, you have a job. You're getting paid to do this job. You signed on the dotted line. You took on the role. You took the job. And that job comes with certain basic...
Fans went into a frenzy when word leaked that Rachel had been called to an emergency meeting with Disney's legal team. The specifics remain fuzzy, nobody's come forward with a full transcript, of course, but the speculation has been rampant. Some say Disney wanted to discuss possible brand-damaging behaviors, pointing to clauses in Rachel's contract that might forbid undermining the film's legacy. Others think Rachel might have sought counsel to protect herself if Disney tried to scapegoat her for the meltdown. What we do know is that the meeting was intense enough for insiders to leak it to the press, describing a sense of urgency and tension.
And one of the most basic is the responsibility to control yourself and comport yourself a certain way publicly so that you don't harm the project and thereby harm all the hundreds of other people who are working on it.
If you read between the lines, it suggests this meltdown escalated from a mere PR headache into a possible legal battle. Did Rachel violate a moral or brand clause? Did Disney fail to support her after instructing her to push the film's modern spin? The rumor mill churned relentlessly, fueling the meltdown even more. Viewers who'd been on the fence now had fresh drama to dissect. Was the star being muzzled by the House of Mouse? Or was the House of Mouse protecting itself from a star who tanked the film's image? And the web of controversy kept expanding.
Because she's not well, she might be stupid, but she's not so dumb that she didn't realize that by, for example, coming out and saying that all Trump supporters deserve to suffer.
Even though Rachel stood in the spotlight, she wasn't alone in this production. Gal Gadot, set to portray a key role, likely the evil queen, largely avoided public entanglement. Some fans found that suspicious. Was it courtesy, strategy, fear? Meanwhile, an entire subplot about the dwarfs set the internet ablaze. Leaks hinted that Disney either toned down their roles or replaced them altogether to dodge accusations of insensitive stereotypes. Some applauded the move as forward-thinking, while others called it a betrayal of an iconic element. In typical meltdown fashion, both sides latched onto every rumor, turning dwarfs or magical creatures into another battleground for how modern is too modern.
It's our friend screaming.
Wow.
Nobody was in there.
Can you go to yeah, that's very, so this is Bob Iger.
Amid these swirlings, talk circulated about test screenings that left audiences puzzled. Some found the comedic approach jarring. Others found the stripped-down romantic elements unappealing. If Rachel and Gal had limited on-screen chemistry, or if the dwarfs aspect felt half-baked, it spelled trouble. By this point, cynics began predicting that no matter how well the film turned out, the meltdown had irreversibly colored public perception. People might come just to hate watch or skip entirely. Either scenario spelled potential financial disaster for a project that devoured an enormous budget.
Disney's Bob Iger says their mission is to entertain, not send messaging as Snow White sales compete for worst performing live-action Disney adaptation ever.
But there were still more layers to uncover. Let's be real, nostalgia is powerful. The 1937 Snow White didn't just entertain millions, it literally set the standard for animation and turned Walt Disney into a household name. Many fans consider it untouchable, practically a holy text in the Disney canon.
This is the difference between a business owner or someone who does very well for themselves in the private sector to become wealthy. This person was born looking a certain way and has a God-given ability to lie.
The meltdown capitalized on that emotional weight. Critics of the remake labeled it disrespectful, zeroing in on Rachel's quotes as proof that the new team looked down on the original. They insisted no good could come from a film whose lead actress seemingly disdains the classic it's based on. On the other side, supporters argued that Snow White was always about hope and optimism, so reimagining it to empower a new generation stays true to that spirit. They questioned whether the holy text approach stifled creativity, forcing Disney to rehash the same old story instead of letting it evolve. For them, Rachel was a hero, bravely calling out outdated ideas in a film that no longer resonates with how we see princesses.
You don't particularly see people who, look like me or are me playing roles like that. So it was definitely, when it got announced,
He wasn't a stalker, by the way.
thing that was like trending on Twitter for days because all of the people were angry.
This culture clash created an even larger meltdown, with folks on social media tearing each other apart. Some posted elaborate breakdowns of the 1937 film's flaws, while others wrote heartfelt essays on preserving its innocence, and the meltdown narrative marched on.
The original film came out in 1937, very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Yeah. Weird. So we didn't do that this time.
Meanwhile, nobody could ignore the enormous budget rumors swirling. Some pegged the production and marketing cost at $250 million or more, which is typically the realm of big tentpole franchises like Marvel or Star Wars. The meltdown threatened to turn that investment into a sinkhole if large swaths of Disney's core audience stayed home. Executives likely panicked at the idea of a Snow White remake tanking at the box office, especially given the storied history behind it.
25,000 more just like her knocking on the same doors that she had opened to her. She had the opportunity of a lifetime, and instead of being humble and grateful, she was entitled and a snot.
Industry watchers noted that reboots rely heavily on brand goodwill. If Rachel's commentary sours that goodwill, and the film doesn't have a strong fallback narrative, the film could bomb in ways few Disney projects ever do. Online discussions joked about it possibly dethroning some of Disney's past flops as the biggest fiasco in live-action remake history. On the other hand, some contrarians predicted that all the meltdown talk might drum up curiosity sales. Trainwreck marketing sometimes works in bizarre ways, drawing folks who want to see if the movie is indeed as dreadful or radical as rumored. Still, that's not the brand synergy Disney typically aims for. Yet the meltdown's momentum showed no sign of slowing.
Entertain, not send messaging as Snow White sales compete for worst performing live-action Disney adaptation ever.
When an actor stands at the epicenter of a meltdown, there are generally two paths forward. Either they manage a powerful redemption, maybe by delivering an incredible performance that silences critics, or they become a cautionary example of how not to handle high-stakes PR. Rachel Zegler's next moves could define her entire career. If the meltdown intensifies, she risks being seen as the actress who dissed Disney's legacy and triggered a franchise collapse. That kind of reputation, fair or not, can stick. Yet redemption isn't off the table.
Our rights are on the line, folks.
The right to buy Cosby sweaters?
Come on.
That's the face of a serial killer.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, just hit the unfollow button.
Sometimes controversies fade if the final product lands well with audiences. If Snow White 2025 defies all the doom and gloom, maybe audiences will say, hey, she did bring new life to the princess. Then the meltdown might morph into a footnote, a memory of initial skepticism that was overshadowed by the film's ultimate success. Of course, that hinges on the film's quality and whether viewers can separate the art from the behind-the-scenes drama. And given how deeply the meltdown has entrenched itself in public discourse, that separation seems challenging, at best. But even beyond Rachel, another question loomed.
And sure, you could, yes, it's made in 1937, but it boggles my mind that Disney took the film that built their empire.
Yes.
That it is a paradigm shift movie that is sacred text in Hollywood and just...
With or without Rachel at the center, the meltdown begs a bigger question. Has the era of big-budget Disney remakes finally hit a breaking point? Over the past few years, critics and even some fans have grumbled about the endless cycle of reboots. But people still bought tickets, so Disney kept churning them out. Now though, the meltdown around Snow White 2025 reveals the hazards of messing too heavily with a text that's deeply embedded in cultural memory. Sure, Cinderella or Aladdin raised eyebrows, but still found success. Yet those films largely followed the original formulas. Snow White 2025 tried to do something more radical and promptly hit a wall of outrage. If this meltdown results in a significant financial loss, Disney might rethink its approach to these nostalgia-fueled ventures. We could see fewer attempts to drastically modernize older tales, or at least a more cautious approach where the star's public commentary is carefully managed.
Disney is reportedly scaling back on Snow White.
this movie is in serious trouble. It's been in production hell forever, and y'all probably know about the controversies because they just keep popping up.
This meltdown might also embolden the audience to demand more respect for classic material if they're paying top dollar for a reimagining, or ironically, it might push Disney to go even bigger and more daring on future reboots, figuring if they're going to melt down anyway, we might as well go all in. And still, the meltdown had one final act. Behind the scandalous headlines,
be a leader as a female and fall in love and be rescued by a prince, like that's incongruous bullshit. That's only the left's version of what it means to be a strong woman or female empowerment.
Some claim the meltdown could lead to actual lawsuits. Perhaps Disney could argue Rachel's public statements damaged the film's potential earnings, prompting a breach of contract suit. Or Rachel's team could claim the studio left her unprotected against online threats and fan attacks after telling her to hype the film's modern spin. The meltdown would then shift from the court of public opinion to a literal court of law, adding another layer of spectacle to an already dramatic story.
Now active involves more to do with both South Park Studios and Paramount, and what they recently did toward both Zegler and the Disney company for their Snow White film. It turns out that both Trey Parker and Matt Stone are already preparing for the DEI special that is set to serve as a sequel to the Panderverse.
Lawsuits aside, we're still left with a sense of dread among Disney insiders that the meltdown has overshadowed any semblance of a constructive dialogue about the film's content. If the spotlight remains on contractual spats rather than the movie's attempts to re-envision an old story for the present day, the meltdown essentially kills the movie's chance at being judged on its own artistic merits. Finally, the meltdown storyline has a coda.
One major development going on now involves more to do with Rachel Zegler and her attitude towards South Park Studios and Paramount after learning about what they are planning for their upcoming special called the DEI special.
So, what's the ultimate takeaway from this chaotic saga? For one, it highlights just how devoted fans can be to certain nostalgic properties. Tinkering with them in a modern way can be a powder keg if you don't handle it deftly. Second, it underscores the unpredictability of social media. One offhand comment about the prince being a stalker can morph into a raging debate about whether you respect the entire Disney canon. Third, it reveals the delicate power dynamic between a global entertainment brand and its talent. Even the biggest star can be blindsided if the corporate machine decides her commentary is no longer beneficial. And even the biggest studio can be derailed if the star stirs enough controversy to overshadow the entire marketing campaign.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway, and that's when I started to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced. And finally, I want to scream, and I'm like, why are they replacing every single character with someone who is diverse?
For all the drama, some fans maintain hope that once Snow White 2025 hits theaters, the meltdown will quiet down and viewers will be able to watch with fresh eyes. Others see the meltdown as the final nail in the coffin. They predict a monumental flop that will forever be cited whenever people bring up Disney's missteps. If that happens, expect a lot of finger pointing and maybe the end of an era for these lavish remakes. At the heart of it remains Rachel Zegler, an undeniably gifted actress who soared to fame in a matter of years, only to find herself branded a controversial figure in the blink of an eye.
It was supposed to come out like a year and a half ago, and then we went after them so hard because of their variety of ridiculous sins that they actually went into full-scale reshoots on Snow White when we announced that we had a competitor.
Whether she emerges from this meltdown battered but triumphant, or overshadowed by a fiasco not entirely of her making, is up to the intricate interplay of fan reaction, corporate decisions, and the film's final reception. One thing is certain, Snow White 2025 will forever be remembered as the project that tested just how far Disney could push a beloved fairy tale, and how quickly a meltdown can unfold when fans decide enough is enough.
It was the first animated film that had the kind of Disney magic that had depth, that had absolute, it was riveting, and it's based, of course, on a Brothers Grimm story.
As of now, the meltdown shows no signs of abating. Every time Rachel posts a new message or gives an interview, a wave of discussion follows. Every time Disney tries to pivot the narrative, releasing a fresh poster, a behind-the-scenes snippet, a new teaser, someone dredges up old comments, reigniting the flame. It's a never-ending cycle that might only conclude once the movie is out in the wild, letting audiences judge for themselves. And maybe that's the silver lining.
And this started with the movie star Rachel Zegler, who I believe would be categorized as a loudmouth dope.
In the end, the film will speak louder than any meltdown, for better or worse. If it's genuinely compelling, fans might forgive the missteps. If it's not, the meltdown's negative aura will have been a harbinger of doom. But no matter how it turns out, Snow White 2025 has become more than just another Disney remake. It's a statement on how precarious it can be to modernize a fabled story in an era where everyone has a platform. Everyone has opinions, and controversies can explode in real time.
As an actor, you don't get to dictate anything. You don't get to dictate if a film actually happens. You don't get to dictate when it is shot, how it is shot, if you can ever speak about it to the public. You are simply just there to show up and say your lines and look the way they want you to look.
Rachel Zegler might have sparked the meltdown, or maybe she was just the easiest face to pin it on. Disney might have overreached by trying to rework such a sacred text so drastically, or perhaps they simply bungled the messaging. However you slice it, the meltdown reveals that in the kingdom of Disney, even the fairest princess can fall victim to cultural earthquakes. And the bigger the legacy behind a property, the bigger the meltdown can become if fans feel that legacy is under siege.
God forbid a woman dream about true love. We're all just sitting around here, maybe I could be president one day. I hate men, I just want to be president. That screams Disney princess. Oh my God, I'm literally getting enraged. Once again, I feel like I'm back in 2022.
So, the final question remains. Will Snow White 2025 rise above the meltdown and deliver a new vision that's genuinely enchanting? Or will the controversies overshadow everything, relegating the film to a footnote in Disney's otherwise gilded history? We'll have to wait and see. In the meantime, The Meltdown stands as one of the most talked about debacles in recent Hollywood, memory reminding everyone, fans, stars, and studio execs alike, that fairy tales can turn into nightmares faster than you can say, once upon a time.